Before launch, people speculated what the F in Silent Hill F stood for. Some speculated it could stand for flowers, given all the floral imagery, or forte, given that it's literally the music note meaning loud or strong. I, on the other hand, at first thought it was F for friends who do stuff together, then as I progressed through the game, I thought it was F for fantastic.
Say that again?
Until I realized that it's really Silent Hill F for turn me up. Because wow, this game really did a number on me. Okay, no, I'm being a little dramatic. It wasn't like the end of A Plague Tale Requiem, where it left me bawling, but a game that can leave you sitting in silence as you watch the credits roll with utter awe is something truly special. And jokes aside though, the F is actually a lot of those things, and really more so up to interpretation than anything. It's crazy to think how many it can apply to. Beyond flowers, fortes, or friends, it's also got a lot of fox imagery. And some may even interpret the F to be fukatsu. Fuku meaning restoration or return, katsu meaning life, which would make perfect sense as it perfectly mirrors the game's central themes. Now, before I go on, here's a brief potential spoiler warning. I won't be discussing any story spoilers, but if you don't want to hear about the story's general setup or any general thematic spoilers either, skip ahead to this timestamp. So if you want to go in totally blind, it's probably best. But then again, you probably wouldn't be watching this video either, let's be real. But the other thing the F could stand for is female or feminine, because this story is deeply rooted in the experiences of women in 1960s Japan, and their social isolation paired with their societal and familial expectations. It's very apparent right out of the gate. The story follows Hinako Shimazu, a high school student trapped between severe gossip and bullying at school and an abusive, repressive home life. A home life with a drunken father, an apologetic abused mother, and a golden child of a sister removed from their lives and their home, already married off. As her emotional world collapses, a strange fungal blight begins consuming the town, twisting the environment into grotesque floral-covered horrors and turning people into puppet-like monstrosities. The supernatural outbreak mirrors Hinako's inner turmoil, blurring the line between psychological trauma and physical reality. Armed mostly with makeshift melee weapons, she fights to survive while confronting manifestations of shame, repression, and suffocating expectations placed on her by her community and family. Throughout her journey, Hinako must untangle the mystery of the blight-swelling Ibisuka-oka and ultimately confront the parts of herself she has long feared, leading to endings that reflect her struggle for identity, agency, and an escape from the forces that shape her. Her friends Shu Iwai, Rinko Nishida, and Sakuko Igarashi are central, and not just to the plot, but what the game says about peer pressure, femininity, friendship, and betrayal. Shu, Hinako's childhood friend, represents the path of conformity and traditional success. He's a medical-minded, level-headed person from a prestigious family whose worldview contrasts sharply with Hinako's rebellious, questioning nature. Rinko is more socially aware, determined to get what she wants, and, if nothing else, a little bit stubborn. She picks up on rumors, gossip, and romantic undercurrents, and her jealousy may rear its head. Her presence shows how social norms and small-town dynamics can strain relationships. Sakuko stands out in a different way. She's tied to the spiritual tradition through her family's local shrine, and she embodies superstition, spiritual belief, and that precarious boundary between folklore and horror that the game walks so well. There are some other supporting characters, including a mysterious guide figure we call Fox Mask, that adds a whole other layer to the already complex dynamics Hinako has. Fox Mask offers a comfort and a guidance when the world is collapsing, but given the twisted nature of the town and its transformations, his intentions remain ambiguous, and he reminds us that trust is fragile when reality is slipping. What this cast achieves is powerful. It's incredibly well acted. You can feel the detail and the trauma in every line and every micro-expression, just as you could in last year's Silent Hill 2 remake. The Japanese voice actor Kunatsu-kato chimed in about her experience working on the game and said, quote, "I've been living as Hinako in a world of Silent Hill for a long time now. On some days, I almost felt my own sanity slipping, but it was worth it to be able to contribute to this game." End quote. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure how often we hear this sort of thing, and to me, it's a telltale sign that she really delivered 110% into this role, and I strongly suggest playing this in Japanese, because her performance is just that good. That's not to say that Susie Young didn't also do an incredible job, as she always does, but especially given that she's not just the original voice actor, but the performance actor, Konatsu raises it tenfold and absolutely got my vote for Best Performance at the Game Awards. Yes, even more than Ben Starr and Jennifer English with their performances in Clair Obscur. As with most things these days, this game has been pretty divisive, but nothing is ever as divisive when it comes to Silent Hill. And some argue this game isn't Silent Hill because it's quite different from some of the originals, namely in the combat, which we'll get to in a minute. But honestly, I have to disagree. To me, this exudes Silent Hill. Apart from the older camera style and it not being set in America and instead Japan, it's still very much a Silent Hill game through and through. It is dark, it has an eerie atmosphere in an empty town filled with monsters lurking behind the fog, and a story about deep psychological trauma. I mean, that's as Silent Hill as it gets. Even still, I do believe that the series is evolving, and cannot stay one thing forever. And I say that as someone who yearns for a time like the old Assassin's Creed games, but at the same time, I'm aware that the series needs to evolve and change sometimes. And even though my favorites are still the Ezio trilogy, I still judge each game by its own merit, and actually really like some of them. But as far as Silent Hill F is concerned, it's barely even a departure from what's come before, unlike the open-world Assassin's Creeds. The combat was a massive point of contention before Silent Hill 2 Remake's release. There was lots of controversy talking about how James doesn't fight very much, and why are they adding combat to Silent Hill? But when I played some of the original, it had quite a bit of combat, just like the remake did. Maybe a little less, but it still had it. And so the arguments similarly began with F. F does have a similar control style and overall gameplay to 2 Remake, except it's also got stamina and weapon durability. This change understandably might have set some people off, but honestly, I think it feeds into the tension. It makes perfect sense to include it because part of the experience is putting you into stressful and desperate situations. It makes you think more carefully and strategic as to which weapons you want to use, or if you should use them at all, or slip past your enemies instead, which is kind of the point. On top of all that, there's also a sanity meter, one that can quickly deplete if you use your focus abilities too often, which are used to increase the damage and the strength output of your attacks and stagger enemies more easily. I didn't find myself using them too often though, as I tried to save as much of my sanity as possible, and really didn't find myself needing it all that much. But I think on higher difficulties, it becomes much more essential as the combat gets more difficult, of course. But on the story difficulty, it wasn't bad at all, which by the way, I chose because the next difficulty up is called hard. Although technically speaking, I guess it would actually be standard, because I just assumed that it actually would be just easy and then hard and no in between, but then the actual hard difficulty is actually one called Lost in the Fog. It's kind of strange the way that they named these, but it is what it is, I guess. Actually, as I was writing this, a new patch dropped with a new difficulty in between. It's labeled as casual. You'd think, oh, okay, this is the much needed medium difficulty then. Nope, it's actually even easier than story. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. Konami, I love this game, but my only critique moving forward is fix your damn naming conventions, please. The combat itself, however, does feel pretty clunky, even more so than Silent Hill 2. And I love that. Huh? You love that? You must be asking yourself? Well, yes, that's the point. I mean, I don't think we should expect James to be an experienced fighter, much less Hinako. Her attacks and swings feel heavy and are simply not calculated, but it's by design. She's frightened and uncertain. There's a rawness to it, one that's a kind of desperate, untrained flailing that makes every encounter feel dangerous. And when you do land a hit, it's not satisfying because it's clean or skillful. It's satisfying because it feels like you barely scraped by. It pulls you into her shoes and reinforces the idea that combat in Silent Hill isn't about feeling OP. It's about survival. Anyway, something I realize I haven't touched on yet is the Consumable System, which actually plays a much bigger role in Silent Hill F than you expect. Just like the older games, you'll find medical supplies scattered throughout the world. Bandages, herbal remedies, quick recovery items, but here, they're tied much more closely to moment-to-moment tension. Because between your stamina, your sanity, and your weapon durability, you're constantly making judgment calls about when to patch yourself up and when to just grit your teeth and push on. What makes consumables feel different in this entry is that they're not just health items. They're part of how you manage Hinako's emotional and physical state. Usually, in survival horror games, these resources really feel scarce and hard to come by, especially on higher difficulties. And that rings here true too. But in Silent Hill 2, for example, I found myself stacking as many items as possible in fear of needing it when I'm truly desperate, thinking, what if I need it later? This game, however, actively made me consume them as often as possible in fear of wasting them, because this system opts for a very small inventory system that doesn't allow for stacking. It can get pretty annoying, but part of me feels like it was a conscious decision so that you have more of a reason to use up as many as possible, which greatly serves the narrative. Either that, or I'm giving the developers way too much credit. Then there are the red capsules. I won't explain the purpose or the significance beyond they give you health, because the game is very deliberate about how it introduces them. What I can say is that their presence lingers with you in a way that most items don't. Even before you understand their full importance, using one feels loaded. Throughout the game, you'll come across small roadside shrines where you can stop, pray, and catch your breath. They're your safe havens, kind of like what you've experienced in Silent Hill 2 with the red squares, and it gives you a chance to save, restore yourself, and invest the faith that you've earned into permanent upgrades. These aren't sprawling skill trees, but targeted boosts to things like your max health, stamina, sanity, and even how many Omamori charms you can equip at once. Omamori themselves are small protective charms you either find hidden in the world or draw from the shrine by spending faith. Each one offers a different passive perk, from improving your survivability to tweaking stamina or item efficiency. And as you unlock more charm slots, you can start mixing effects to suit how you want to handle the game's threats. As for the puzzles, I had it set to hard, meaning standard, because I actually enjoy a bit of a challenge with those, and yeah, they actually were somewhat challenging, but in a good way. I've seen some people complain about the puzzle design lacking, but I enjoyed them, and I thought they were quite clever. It just took me some time to figure out, because in truth, I'm not the smartest, but I got there eventually. And it was also a nice break between the combat and the traversal and the horrors of it all. It breaks up the pace. What immediately defines the game's visual identity is the fusion of beauty and decay. The fungal flowering phenomenon doesn't just rot the world, it transforms it into something strangely elegant, horrifying, but mesmerizing. Crimson and ivory blooms crawl along the walls and floors like veins. Petals drift through the air where dust should be. Everyday objects become twisted monuments of organic growth, as if the environment itself is blossoming and dying at the same time. It's both disgusting and beautiful, disturbing and calm. A place where horror grows like a flower, unfurling in colors you can't decide are mesmerizing or sickening. And I can't really talk about a Silent Hill game without touching on the sound design and music, because this series has always understood that audio is half the horror. Silent Hill F carries that legacy beautifully. The ambient zones are filled with this eerie minimalism. Soft wind, distant snaps, these sickly chimes that feel like they're echoing from somewhere you don't want to go. Some areas even play with distorted nursery rhyme-like motifs that twist innocence into something unnerving. The music blends melancholy with dread in a way that fits Hinako's journey perfectly, never overwhelming the moment, but always lingering underneath it. And then there's the silence. The game uses the silence like a weapon. There are stretches where everything just cuts out, leaving you alone with your thoughts and whatever might be breathing in the fog with you. Even if you don't consciously register it, the audio is constantly shaping the tension and is part of why the atmosphere hits as hard as it does. I played this on the PS5 Pro and I had an awesome time. It's an incredibly beautiful atmospheric game and the colors and contrast all really pop. It looks great, but again, just like our last Konami game, it doesn't run as expected. Digital Foundry reports that it runs decently well on the base PS5, but on the Pro, it starts to have issues that I, myself, had come to notice. Namely, the noise drizzled over the foliage that remains pretty consistently throughout the entire game. For me, it didn't bother me too much, because everything else outshone this, but this is a blemish I am also somewhat disappointed to see, given that this is running on what is supposed to be more premium hardware. It's mostly Unreal Engine 5 Konami games, though, that I've noticed has a harder time with PSSR implementation from what I've tested thus far. But it would help if they didn't for some reason limit our options into a singular mode. I mean, I don't see why we couldn't also have performance or quality as well. That being said, performance overall didn't bother me as much, just like it didn't with Metal Gear, but it is something worthy of note. As for PC, I'll link the video below, but it doesn't seem to be looking particularly great for that platform either. In terms of length and pacing, Silent Hill F is tight and well structured. It's not an overly long game, but it also never feels like it's cutting corners or rushing through important beats. Each chapter flows naturally into the next with a strong balance between exploration, puzzles, story elements, and combat. The game knows when to slow down and when to squeeze the tension, and while a couple of sections might feel a little bit drawn out depending on the player, overall it maintains a steady rhythm that keeps you engaged from start to finish. But I suppose that's what's expected from a horror game anyway. As for replayability, there's actually a good reason to return once you finish the story, because Silent Hill F features multiple endings. I won't spoil any details, but they offer different conclusions to Hinako's journey based on choices and the performance throughout the game. While it isn't a massive branching narrative, the alternate endings add a meaningful variety, and especially once you have a better understanding of the game's themes and the way your decisions shape Hinako's fate. Personally, I have not done subsequent playthroughs, as it can be very demanding on time considering the differences are mostly only seen at the end, and thus I simply just watched the other 4 endings on YouTube. And note, the first ending that you achieve is the same for everyone, no matter what. It's only when revisiting that you'll be able to unlock the rest. By the time the credits rolled, I realized that F was never meant to be pinned down to one meaning. It's a feeling, a knot in your stomach, a breath that you didn't realize you were holding, a story that blossoms into something frightening and strangely beautiful. Silent Hill F doesn't just revive the series, it reframes it, reshaping the familiar language of the franchise into something more intimate and quietly devastating. It's a game that begins softly, almost delicately, and then tightens its grip until you're left with that lingering heaviness that Silent Hill is known for, the kind that stays with you long after the screen has gone dark. What impressed me most is that this game isn't trying to compete with older titles or outdo them. Instead, it builds on its own identity. It's messy, emotional, haunting, and sometimes even overwhelming, but all of it feels intentional. It's horror grown from lived experience, shaped by shame, loneliness, and the quiet battles people fight when no one's paying attention. Hinako's journey feels personal in a way that's hard to shake, and the world around her reflects that, blooming, rotting, collapsing, and rebuilding, often in the same breath. Silent Hill F is powerful and masterful. It leaves you unsettled in a way that isn't just loud or cheap, but slow and insidious, and that to me is what Silent Hill has always been at its best. If this is the first step in a new chapter for the series, then we could be in for more entries just as remarkable. Silent Hill is back in its own twisted way, and honestly, I can't wait to see where it drags us next.